Welcome, Kaylee. All right, welcome to our July meeting of the Access to Justice Board. We'll start, I think everyone who's here has been here before. Kaylee, have you been here before? Okay.
I have, but I'm happy to introduce myself if you want.
Well, you do have the Washington Courts banner behind you, so I think, but please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Kaylee Carrillo. I work with AOC and I'm a court program analyst. I'm the point of contact for the courthouse facilitator program around the state. Thank you for having me.
Right, so the first is the June minutes. They were on pages 5 and 6 of the materials. Are there any amendments, changes, corrections to the minutes? All right, hearing none, can I have a motion from the board to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Great, all right. Then can I have a vote from the board members? All in favor of the minutes, raise your hand. I see, looks unanimous. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Welcome to our folks who are joining us. Abby, Cesar, Carol, Alex. All right, so here is a very brief OCLA director search update. There were originally 8 submissions for the search firm. They were narrowed down to 4. In June, those 4 were interviewed, and the search firm has selected, and the search committee has selected a search firm to go forward. The contract will be signed next week, and then after the contract is signed, I will be more than happy to disclose. Probably the first opportunity will be at Disco, who the search firm will be, and then they're going to be up and running quickly because 4 months from Monday will be November 17th, and that will be the day that the names are due to the Supreme Court. So the search firm has a lot to do, and was picked because of how close the firm and its goals and its mission aligned with the mission of the search committee for the future of OCLA. So we are quite pleased. So stay tuned on that. We were going to spend 2 minutes talking about the ATJ Board recruitment update. Dave Keenan.
Hi, thanks, Terry. So just an update. The recruiting process is all done. It was a pretty rigorous process. We had 23 applicants. We offered interview slots to 11 of those applicants, and we interviewed 10. But we also considered 2 individuals who had interviewed with the board in the past, and it was just really a deep talent pool. It was a blessing, but it made the board's job very hard because so many wonderful applicants applied. The board voted this morning to recommend to the Board of Governors 2 individuals. I'm not going to name them right now because they haven't been nominated, because this vote just took place about 15 minutes ago. So once they've been notified and we've sent those recommendations on to the Board of Governors, we'll announce who that was probably at the next meeting. But ultimately, the Board of Governors has to agree to those nominees, and then finally the Supreme Court has to agree to those nominees, and then they'd be seated in September. But really grateful to the board and to the recruiting committee for their work.
Thank you, Judge Keenan. So Diana Singleton is not here. The next topic was ATJ Board Stipends Policy Update. SB, I don't know if that's something you can speak on or whether we should just pass.
I can say a couple of things on it. Diana and I met and we're going to have another meeting with a couple of other folks to broaden the discussion. But we talked about we talked about what it is that we need to do first, and goals and timelines, and then getting feedback on a draft policy and discussing outreach plan. And the discussion on outreach plan is probably the most important thing that we need to do, because in order to have the discussion on goals and timeline or getting feedback on a draft policy, we need to make sure that we have people in the room that should be in the room. And so we're going to be focusing on that, and then establishing a document that we can start from. It's not going to be the document, it's just a draft that we can start from. And because we also want to check with other organizations, entities who have a policy already. And then from there, look at what our timeline and goals are. And our hope is that in the first part of next year that we will have this policy in place. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen between now and then. So we're just at the very tip of it. That's it.
Thank you. And as long as you're unmuted, do you want to just jump into the update on the ATJ conference? But I think Cesar has a question about the board stipends.
Yes, I do. Thanks. I've been a little bit confused with the discussion and the various memos and so on. Am I understanding this correctly, that the ATJ board's desire to have a stipend policy has morphed into the ATJ board being charged with devising a stipend policy for WSBA and all of its committees, task forces, groups, etc., as a whole, before the ATJ board can implement its own policy?
Well, I don't know if the word charged is accurate, but what we're doing is developing verbiage for a policy to share with the BOG, with WSBA. And but there's a lot that has to go into that. There's a lot of questions, as you say. It's, you have question that's confusing. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to figure all that out, and so that we can get support for such a policy from WSBA, and which would help us implement our own policy, but it will also, I think, help others implement a policy. But there's a lot that needs to be considered in that. It's not a simple thing to do. It's complicated, as you can imagine.
I get it, and certainly for WSBA, for the BOG, I should say, they're talking about budget line or amendment, and then that implicates much more than just the ATJ board's operation. So now I understand. I just was trying to figure out like who's doing what and why. Just a short follow-up on that. Is there a place or repository where the information or deliberations of the ATJ board's committee that led to the recommendation is available or accessible? I know that you all discuss having looked at other alliance organizations, and there are some of them that are named and so on, but was all that information gathered into a document that a bigger document that detailed who's doing what and so on and so forth as part of the recommendation that led to the adoption of the policy?
The adoption of the ATJ policy?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not sure how much documentation there is. Bonnie and Terry, can you help me out with that, please?
Yeah, we do have documentation of all that research, and I think it was included in meeting materials many months ago. So it's public and I can share it out if people want to see it.
Thanks. Yeah, at some point, if you could just point me to which meeting that compilation was provided, if it was as part of a meeting, and if not, yeah, I'd love to see it. Just as a FYI, our board is adopting a policy at its, well, there is a proposed policy that will be acted on at our board meeting this month. And one of the things I did do as well was sort of review some of the alliance programs and so on, and it seemed like there was a disconnect between what I was seeing and what seemed to have been reported in the original. So I was hoping to track back to that to make sure I'm understanding things. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. And this is going to help us really hone this whole process, is people asking questions. We need that. Thank you.
And Cesar, the thing that I would say about your first question, my understanding is that because the ATJ is one of 6 independent boards, this is where it came up first for the BOG, is the independent boards, not the.
Got it.
That's what I was focusing on. But I don't disagree with your word charged, because I think that it doesn't surprise me that the ATJ, the Access to Justice Board, is leading this discussion for the BOG. And sometimes, sometimes the tail has to wag the dog. So.
Thanks, Terry. I will say that, and I stated this at a prior ATJ board meeting, I do have some concerns with the overall ATJ, where the ATJ landed, and particularly the impact and what it can and might do to smaller organizations in terms of just the sort of the analysis and again where folks landed. But I've said that before. And at one point, and we don't need to get into a whole discussion about that since it's already been adopted and so on.
And my understanding also is that the Attorney General's bill from last year set up a system that applies, or not a system, but a framework that applies to executive branch agencies. The judiciary branch has determined that, not a surprise, they want their own policy, and there was one draft one, now they're reworking it. So all of this is, we are leading the charge here, and all of us are breaking new ground, I think. And I think also, because I see Caitlin, I see Laura, LFW is also working on this as well, right? So.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm raising my hand, Terry.
Yes.
I don't have the little.
Okay.
Yes, we're working on it. It's a work in progress. We've established what we think is a fair, stipend, which is what we're calling it, stipend honorarium for people with lived experience. But what I understand is the ATJ board is recommending a policy for the Board of Governors, and it's not going to be mandatory for all alliance partners to follow the exact same policy, because we all have different scopes of work and amount of time, and right. And this is very, kind of WSBA centric. Although I'm very glad the ATJ board is leading the charge. I think it's totally appropriate, and it's about time.
And that's my understanding as well, that this is not mandatory for the alliance partners.
Mm-hmm.
But this is something we feel, going back to the whole point, that what is the issue that we're trying to solve here, is if we believe very strongly that our work must involve community partners, and in order for community partners who are not compensated by their employers to be able to participate, the only way that we can get meaningful participation is if they are compensated for their lived experience. So, and I think that's our common ground.
So look forward to more reports on this as we keep working on it.
Thank you. So SB, as long as you were unmuted, do you want to talk about the ATJ conference update?
Okay, so let's see. The conference, and Bonnie, I might need your help in terms of some numbers. We're moving along. I wasn't able to participate in the meeting that we just had. I have family from out of town and we all know how that goes. So registration is moving along. Please, if you haven't registered, please do so. Get the word out, because registration and outreach are key to making sure that we have the folks that should be there. And we have had quite a few folks that have submitted to be presenters at the conference. And so Bonnie, do you have some of those numbers available? Oh, here's the, okay.
Yeah, I put a link in the chat to the event website.
Okay.
Yeah, I think right now we have about 214 people registered. We have a total of 38 sessions that we're organizing around. Of course, some of those will be concurrent, but we're really working diligently to get all of our presenters titles and session descriptions. And later this month, we plan to post what we're calling sort of a soft launch of the agenda, where we're going to share everything that we have so far, with a note that things might still be getting updated until September at the conference. What other numbers were you hoping for me to share, SB?
I think that those are good unless somebody else wants some other numbers, but one of the things that there's several other things that are happening, of course, the logistics, making sure that we have the kind of rooms that we need for the conference, because it's not just the rooms for the workshops or the presentations, but there's other things that happen in a conference. We want to make sure we have those. And the reception on Friday night is being worked on. And for, and what we want to do in the reception is to, we've invited some of our leaders, legal leaders, and that they make short couple-minute presentations, but commit to sticking around for the time of the reception so that people can get to know them. They can get to know who's in the room rather than it just be a cameo appearance. It's important that we do that because of the community. Our hope is because of the community representation at this conference. And a lot of folks have not been in rooms with the power brokers in our state. And we want to make sure that people have access to those folks, like our Chief Justice, and there's some other folks that we're hoping will be there. So that's being worked on. Also, the other part that's being worked on is the involvement of the Puyallup tribe. We've been communicating with the one of the board members of the Puyallup tribe, who is working with Bonnie to be part of the opening and welcoming and doing a prayer and helping us out with that. But really our hope is that from this conference and those connections with the folks at the Puyallup, that we are able to sustain a longer term relationship than just, hey, can you come and participate and make a presentation at a conference? No, it's more, let's figure out how it is that we can continue doing something together going forward. So we're going to be doing some of that work between now and then to ensure that it's not a one-time, it's not a date, one date and that's it. So, and I think we're on our way for that. There's already relationships that we have with the Puyallup. So we're hoping to strengthen those relationships and make them more concrete. Let's see. I'm not sure if this, and Terry, were you at the meeting?
I was.
Okay.
So thank you, SB. I'll just add a few other numbers. One, Chief Justice Gonzalez is going to be speaking, has agreed to speak at our reception. Brief remarks at our reception Friday night at Alma in Tacoma. 8 out of 9 justices have registered for the conference. So 8 out of 9 of the Supreme Court justices will be at the conference. And that's, I think, a pretty remarkable number.
Yeah.
And the other thing, we've never done this before, right? Where this is a brave new world, but we are offering a limited hybrid option. And apparently 10% of the registration is for the limited hybrid option. So we had no idea. We had no idea what that number would be. So, and we don't know if that's going to change as registrations
Mhm.
continue to come in. By the end of the month, when the agenda is posted, as Bonnie was saying, the soft launch, that is generally also a huge tipping point in terms of people then registering for the conference. So we're expecting the number to go up dramatically. I don't want to pick a number and be wrong about it, but the number will go up dramatically, and it'll be interesting to see whether the limited hybrid option continues to be something that people are selecting or not. Again, we had no idea what to expect with that. But I think 8 out of 9 Supreme Court justices will be there. So I think that's a pretty good response from Olympia. Other questions people have?
Yeah. So the agenda will be released soon. As we're working on the presenters, as soon as we have it together, we will send that out. Thank you.
And we also, I think the other thing that I wanted to add is that thank you to our fundraising committee, has exceeded, our fundraising committee has exceeded expectations. And thus far, we have been able to give a lot of scholarship funds for people to be able to attend. So thank you all for those of you who did the work on that. Yes. So leading into that discussion, unless there's any questions about that, is historically we have an Access to Justice Board meeting at the conference, and I think that would be Friday morning, September 29th, right, Bonnie?
The Thursday morning.
Thursday morning before the conference begins. So September 28th. But the question that I wanted to pose to the board members and also to our Alliance members here is, what should that meeting encompass, right? It's the meeting right before we go into 2 full days of our conference. What should we be thinking about for the topic for the agenda for the September meeting? Well, one thing could be a great pat on the back. We could do a little victory lap around the Tacoma Dome, but again, or there may not be ideas right now, but we're open to receiving ideas. SB, were you going to say?
No, I was just going to try to encourage. We really, we work best, I think we work best when we hear from as many folks as possible of ideas and suggestions. We might have some ideas, suggestions, but it's really important to hear from you all.
And Vanna put in the chat outreach as a possible topic for that meeting. And I notice we have 2 members of our community advisory panel here, Carol and Jonas.
How much time would we have for that meeting? Would it just be the regular 2 hours or 3 hours that's usually allocated for the working session and then 2-hour board meeting?
The conference starts at 1. So working backwards.
So just be morning, maybe morning.
It would just
lunch.
be morning, and it might not even be the working session, but it just might be the public session. I'm just thinking off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'm thinking 90 minutes.
Okay. And then I would also be curious to know if folks in the Alliance are planning on attending the ATJ, because that might, I think depending on who's attending might determine the topics that we would want to discuss. But I would be open to having, whenever we can do in-person meetings, I always encourage that. And I think those are opportunities to think about like what are, topics and agenda. I mean, I think there seems to be some, energy about how do we bring in community into decision making, and what does that look like? And I think there might be some space for that. But yeah, I would be supportive of that. Is there someone, Terry, would we send you the topics or things of that nature of, or how would we would like to move forward? Bonnie? Okay.
Bonnie can, yeah, everyone
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
Bonnie's email. All right. There's no other comments about that. We'll move on to our next topic, which is the Yakima Valley Needs Assessment Report, next steps. And I see Elizabeth is here. So the report had, the report is attached to the agenda, and there are, right at the top, there were 5 primary recommendations for the board, and I'll spread that out for the board and maybe the alliance. Alternatives to lawyers in providing general education and direct legal services, strengthening the Washington Supreme Court Admissions and Practice Rule 6, creating access to a law school in Central Washington to grow the number of attorneys of color in those communities, revision of statute RCW 2.53030, which is the OCLA statute of what OCLA can cover, removing restrictions on areas of law for which funding can be used, and reforming the statewide model for centralized intake and coordination of services through technology innovation and regional localization of access points. And all of those are explained in greater detail in the report. So was there something, Elizabeth, I hate to put you on the spot while you're drinking, but was there something that you wanted to draw our attention to in these recommendations?
No, I mean, this is a follow-up from, we presented the actual needs assessment and the findings and our thoughts last time. And then this is the committee's letter in response to the report that we received. So this is from the undocumented communities subcommittee of what we think should be the focuses moving forward and thinking creatively about how we're delivering services and how we could be doing that better. There's also multiple other people from the committee on here, if any of you want to weigh in. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Mostly if anybody has questions, that's why I thought I'd show up.
Mm-hmm. I did have,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just one, I don't know if it's a minor, not an edit or an expansion, if you will, of the summary on the bullet points there. The amendment to 2.53.030 as set out in the letter is that state OCLA funding be expanded to permit immigration work, which it is not right now. It's not just a general revamp of the statute or anything like that. Aside from recommendation 4, which speaks to just wanting to set out a vision where funding doesn't have restrictions or limitations and can be used flexibly and depending on community, local needs, etc. But the revision to the statute is to allow for or that would include immigration work being performed as a part of general basic civil legal aid, which I'm sure NERB, being overwhelmed as they are, might welcome, or I don't know how that would work, but in any event.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because in the last session, or actually 2 sessions ago, I guess, was the deletion of the section that prohibited OCLA from working with undocumented communities. And so then I was curious about how else the statute should be changed, and that's about adding specifically immigration work into the statute.
Or, ultimately, if we don't restrict funds based on legal issue and it's eligible to be used for all civil law, that's the ideal. But the area that's specifically impacted, I think most noticeably is immigration.
So completely separate from this, but as a small tangent that hopefully will be connected, because of the OCLA search is addressing RCW 2.53.020, which is the requirements of the director of OCLA. There, as many people know, there's been a lot of energy to change other parts of the OCLA statute. I will just say, as a person who's co-chairing the search committee, I would like to see that statute changed. I have no knowledge about whether or not there's going to be an effort to change that statute, but this would be an interesting time if you were going to change 020, you could change 030 at the same time, and they could be a combined bill if there was someone who was willing to lead that charge. So I'm just putting that out there, that the search for the next director has brought forth some issues about what's in 020, and it may be time to relook at the OCLA statute. The Supreme Court would have to be involved in that. Other comments or questions about the final recommendations?
Sorry, I didn't.
No, go ahead.
Didn't raise my hand and I was speaking mutedly.
Oh.
I'm not sure what the posture is exactly of the recommendation in terms of the this communication. I'm not sure how to phrase this exactly, whether this is before the board for some kind of action, or can you clarify that for me, Terry? Or
no, there's not. This wasn't put before the board for action. I think this was presented to the board, and now we have to figure out where the board's efforts are going to go for this. And I see Elizabeth shaking her head yes. So I think that's the. But no, this is not up for a vote.
thanks. Yeah, no, I think that depending on each recommendation, there might be some a need for a lot more discussion in terms of, whether or what or how some of these things may move forward, or what the ATJ board may want to do.
Right, or certainly. Well, I mean, you were involved in this, and there's a number of points about this, about CLEAR, which dovetails with what we heard in Wenatchee on our site visit about difficulty accessing CLEAR. So I don't know that that's something that the ATJ board can vote on, other than to support increased funding to provide more services through CLEAR.
Also, I think we need to proceed carefully in terms of trying to seek we have to really do some serious consulting with the EJC, et cetera, in terms of the immigration, a possible amendment on the immigration side to the statute. That's proceed with caution kind of thing.
Proceed with caution. Absolutely. Other comments about the recommendations? I will note that when I went looking on the court website this morning for APR 6, it is not listed on the Supreme Court website. It is listed on the Bar Association website, but APR 6 is not listed. Make of that what you will. I intend to get some more information about that. Other comments or thoughts about these recommendations?
Yeah, my thoughts, just without reading a deep dive, I think that a lot of the recommendations are fairly consistent to what we heard when we were in Wenatchee, and it just kind of speaks to some of the systemic issues that kind of going upstream and seeing how it's impacting communities who receive legal services. And so I am kind of curious on that same line. It's like, how does the board want to move forward with some of these suggestions? Because I think that they do uncover some of the systemic and root cause issues, but how do we, like, how does the board decide? Is it based on, what are the priorities for the next year? Like, how does the board decide how to tackle some of these issues? Because I see there's a couple of different buckets here. There's the policy part, there's the budget, and then there's some like, how do policy issues like within the system, in terms of providing services, policies around changing the laws. There's a budget issues around how to get funding for some of these projects and some of these that we're hearing. And then I'm also seeing kind of a little bit more of like, how do you, more around community engagement piece, like how do we bring in community so that they can understand and know about the legal system? And so these are some common themes that I hear kind of come up, kind of percolating as I hear these things and kind of figure out like, how do we put these into buckets? So I am curious to know, like, maybe the question is maybe like in the past, how has the board proceeded on these type of recommendations to come forward? Because I think it's going to be probably consistent with some of the other things that we may hear from other reports.
Hey everybody, it's Vanna.
Go ahead, Vanna.
I wanted to figure out, because we talked about systemic issues and barriers, and then our conference is about accountability. A lot of the community members who have received civil legal aid services, like from DAC, they have been negatively impacted by the civil legal aid attorneys, but there's no accountability for their actions. And there's consistent harm being done to the people of color, especially Black people. And so how do we undo the harm? How do we hold these attorneys, staff who are causing the harm accountable for their actions? For me, being on this board, I'm here to hold all the harm that is done, all the people who are causing all these issues. I would like to see some kind of accountability for these harms. And I want to show the people who is being impacted negatively how we are undoing this in favor of justice. And it's like we have to go backwards before we can go forward, and that's just something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanna.
I guess in my response, I think I'm focusing a little bit differently. I'm thinking, how do we hold ourselves accountable to what this report is talking about? Like, as an ATJ board, how does this tie into our priorities? How does this tie into our mission and our purpose? And that's the part that I'm wondering. It's not so much, I'm thinking about not holding the legal community accountable. How do we hold ourselves accountable to make sure that, hey, this has been brought forward. How do we want to proceed with these issues, and how do we prioritize these issues based on what is our mission and purpose? So those are the questions that I have, is much more that role, the clarity of kind of what is our role and our purpose, and what are those boundaries around that. That's the part that I see this broadly.
I'd like to just respond to Vanna's statement, and I think, Vanna, you bring up I think something that everybody here is aware of, and that's why they're on this meeting, in this meeting, or on the board, is the discussion we were having earlier about the focus of the September ATJ board. That's a topic that we could maybe hash out a little bit more amongst each other around accountability, because it is part of what this conference is about. And it's a word that we all use often. So I think that you've brought up something that could be a topic for that meeting, and to dig deeper into it and come up with some ideas, suggestions of how we do that.
I think that's a good point. Mike, we'll come back to your point about the report. I think SB and Vanna, that's a good point in terms of, I mean, one of the questions that comes up is whether or not people doing work in this field are missing education. Is there an educational component that if they just understood the impact of their work, that there would be better outcomes and different outcomes? So is an educational lack, we'll assume best interests on the part of the providers. And so maybe we need to talk about what is the gap there that people aren't learning about to be able to advise their clients, and to get better accountability. I think we could tie those together. I think, to Mike, to your point about, I mean, I don't know, I would throw this out to other board members about whether we've ever been in a position like this. I see this as a completely new area for us, because for so long, right, no money could go to serve the undocumented community, folks in the undocumented community. And so that's why this was so novel for us, for the work group to get involved and do this needs assessment and then to push this forward, is because this is a brave new world, unlike other areas where, landlord tenant or whatever, not as big a brave new world as this is. So I think we're in a little bit of a, where do we go from here? Because we don't have a framework that we had before. But I mean, I throw it out to other folks, board members or alliance members, about whether or not this looks like something we've done before, and what happened with that. Cesar.
I'm not sure I understood your question. Obviously, there is a dynamic or a need. Programs have contracts, they have limited resources, they need to engage both with attempting to further the state plan on the one hand, and then dealing with their realities in terms of resources, footprint, etc. So I'm not sure. So the question of the undocumented services to the undocumented as somehow being distinct from general operations for organizations or providers. I'm not sure what the distinction you were trying to draw is. So I lost the thread there. So if you could clarify the question again, I appreciate that.
Maybe I was just hoping there was a thread. It just seems to me that this was a different this was a new area that we had never thought about having impact before, because for so long it had been off the table. And once the statute was changed, then we could think about having impact. I was just trying to answer Mike's question about, like, how do we proceed from here, and Mike, if I remember your question, it was, what have we done in the past? And I was like, in this area, we've not done anything in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my question, because it would be, I think that these are real issues, and I'm just trying to put it into our framework of our, our role, purpose, and figuring out how does this tie in to our priorities and our work. And so it was more of a broader question, without saying yes or no, we're going to do something or not, but to get a framework of how do we move forward, knowing that these are our roles, this is the purpose of the organization, and maybe that would be instructive. Because the things that are coming up in these recommendations is what we're hearing as well. So it's not like anything new, but maybe the process and maybe how we proceed might be a new way. And that was what I was trying to figure out, like, what have we done in the past when these things have come up, and what was our learnings from those? That was it.
And I see,
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. I see Elizabeth's hand.
Yeah, I'll jump in, because I know folks are kind of getting caught up on the undocumented component, which
Yeah.
as the undocumented community subcommittee, we wholly want to elevate that this is a community that is, like, grossly, underserved. And one, most of the Alliance has been serving undocumented folks for a very long time. It's just that we've had to do all this funky flexing of funds because we couldn't specifically use OCLA money for it. So services have been happening. And then the other thing is, I guess, think less about the undocumented part when thinking about where to move forward. I guess we see this as a call to action with multiple calls. And so has the ATJ board ever received a call to action from subcommittee or from community groups saying, hey, this is something that we need to fix in our delivery system, and here's some recommendations, and what do you do when you're provided with that information, regardless of the community that is at the center of it?
Can I just add something? Thank you, Elizabeth, because the whole time that the discussion was happening, I kept having this angst inside, and you kind of articulated what that angst was coming from. We need to normalize the existence of folks that are happen to be undocumented and caught in this, caught between a rock and a hard place, really, that was created not by them. And we need to undo that reality and create a different reality. And so this is a paradigm shift, not in our belief that we should be doing the work, but a paradigm shift and actually thinking more personally for organizations like ATJ Board, what exactly are we going to do to impact this change that needs to happen? And so it's, I see it more, it's yes, the folks we're talking about are undocumented, but it's an issue of justice. And so I appreciate you articulating it the way you did, Elizabeth. I think it's helpful, and it's a learning process, I think, for everybody. So we just need to get to work, more work. I mean, it's not like we haven't been working. We just need more work out of this.
More work. Thank you. And thank you, Elizabeth. I didn't realize that services were being provided, but just many hoops needed to be jumped through. I see a number of people shaking their heads, yes. Cesar.
I like both Elizabeth and SP noted, we have been serving the undocumented. We have been doing the work. There have been constraints. But I think the ATJ board has historically, the question of services to the undocumented, certainly for the entirety of my experience at NJP, the ATJ board has been very engaged with trying to figure out ways to respond to this horrible gap in our delivery system, in our aspirations. That I can go back to the time when, LFW was funding an attorney to be available to pro bono programs for special consultation on immigration related questions, because again, there was the lack of resources the public funding restrictions really accentuated the lack of resources otherwise available for that kind of work. And frankly, I think that the board received the call to action and responded when this committee recommended to the board that it support an amendment to the statute to remove the restriction. That we went through that process, and the board responded and endorsed that change, and Columbia then took up the lobbying piece, and the statute was amended. I think so we are now at a place where we can truly attempt to begin addressing this. I'll make a comment about that in a second, but I think, and we sort of get a little bit concerned here, but there is now the ability to use state funds to represent undocumented person in general matters, not necessarily in immigration related matters. And thank God for the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, which has always been an important, critical component in what we've been able to do. I think that the question of amending the statute on the immigration issue, I mean, that gets into a very technical kind of question. I think the aspiration of having unrestricted public funds, again, that's a very big aspirational issue. But I think where we are right now is trying to operationalize the statutory amendment. And later this month, at the Delivery Systems Committee, we're going to be providing some updates on the work that NJP is undertaking in order to fix, if you will, NJP's entire delivery system to ensure that undocumented persons can receive general civil legal aid services without regard to status throughout the state of Washington. That's a big undertaking, and as I said, we're going to be presenting at DISCO about that at this early stage, where this is still going to be a months long, and implementation wise, it probably may not be until mid year in 24, but we're very much embarked on trying to do that. So I'm not sure whether the issue is amending the statute, trying to remove all restrictions and so on and so forth, but the thrust of the conversation, I hope this helps in terms of framing not only what's been done in the past, but also some of what the community and providers are attempting to do now as well, to maybe facilitate the ATJ board's thinking about what's next or what happens next.
Thank you, Cesar. That's very helpful. And it will be very interesting to hear that presentation at DISCO at the end of the month. All right, unless there are, this seems to be the day for technical difficulties for folks. Unless there are other comments, we will move ahead on our agenda. Thank you again to Elizabeth and to Blanca for leading that work group. So the next agenda item is the liaison report from Minority and Justice.
Yes, my name is Mike Jin. I'm on the ATJ board and I also serve as the liaison. It was something that SB stepped off and I stepped into that role. And I've only attended a couple of meetings just because of the scheduling conflict of their meetings on Fridays every other month, sometimes conflicts with our ATJ board meetings also on Fridays. So for those who might be new or who have much more familiarity, I kind of wrote up some notes around the liaison report to report out. And I know there's a couple of people who are also members, Judge Geip also, so feel free to correct me as I'm giving this liaison report. So the purpose of the Minority and Justice Commission is to identify bias of racial, ethnic, national origin, and similar nature that affects the quality of justice in the Washington state courts. It also takes affirmative steps to address and eliminate such biases and work collaboratively with the Supreme Court commissions and other justice system partners. And the co-chairs are Justice Mary Yu, as well as Justice Veronica Alicia Galvan. So that kind of gives a framework of kind of the purpose of this meeting. Like I said, their next meeting is next Friday, I believe, from 9 to 12, and they meet every other month. So quick updates. First thing is a couple of us on the ATJ board attended the National Consortium on Racial and Ethnic Fairness in the courts. And that was on May 21st and 24th. It was Vanna, Jeremiah, and myself. And we did have a cameo appearance by SB at that meeting. It was actually an incredible conference at the Motif, and Judge Anthony Geip, really kudos to your planning committee and the people who helped put that together. It was an amazing conference. The first day was really focused, they had some great speakers from, across the US. I think really the highlight for me on that conference was the video that was shown by Jeffrey Robinson. For those who, I don't know if folks have seen that video or the movie that you put out called Who We Are, A Chronicle of Racism in America. That was an incredible showing. It's also available on Netflix. I did not know that, but it was something that is worth watching to really give a very historical political perspective of racism in America. And then the second day was really focused around the Japanese American incarceration. There was some authors who spoke at a panel, and they had some really engaging conversations. I ended up buying all 3 books for family members for Christmas, which was great to have authors there in present and really talk about the historical, the political, and the storytelling that took place. Some of the other focus on for the commissions, and this is, I actually reached out to Frank Thomas, who supports the commission. He kind of gave me some tips of kind of topics to cover. One of the topics was they haven't really formally set their objectives and activities for the upcoming fiscal year, but there are some projects that they have been working on and reports. One of them is the jury diversity report. I don't know if folks have received that report that came out. It was a survey of demographics by Seattle University to look at the demographics and access to, who's actually serving on juries. It's something that I could probably send to Bonnie. I don't know if folks have already received a copy of that. I don't want to be repetitive and flood people's, but it's an interesting report that really identifies what are some barriers to people serving on juries. Another thing is that they have, the Minority Justice Commission is also in the process of working with the legislature to finalize parameters for a multi-million-dollar pilot project to increase juror pay. And also expanding in community and youth engagement. And they're looking at expanding its community activities and to move out of the pandemic era operations and back into in-person events. MJC is sponsoring the annual Youth and Law Forum events in Tri-Cities and Seattle. And those programs have recently expanded to Pierce County, Bremerton, and Spokane. And then the 2024 annual symposium is going to be the centerpiece of MJC's educational programming in its annual Supreme Court Symposium, which is typically held the first week of June. So that'll be in 2024. MJC has chosen as its 2024 topic, the exploration and the intersection of race, gender identity, and sexuality under the law, and will present the symposium jointly with the Supreme Court, with the court's Gender and Justice Commission. If there are any questions, Frank is happy to either provide additional information. I'm happy to relay any questions that come up from this commission or from the ATJ board, and happy to send it along. Judge Kipe, you want to add anything? Because I know that you're a pretty active member on the MJC, or any other people who also participate in these bi-monthly meetings.
No, Michael, thank you. You covered it well.
And hopefully this was my first liaison report, so hopefully this was met expectations around kind of an update. Like I said, I've only been able to attend 2 of those meetings just because of the meeting conflict with the ATJ board meetings. But I will be attending the next meeting, which is next Friday, 9 to 12.
You got a couple of thumbs up and you had notes, so you exceeded expectations.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I think he raised the bar way too high for the rest of us liaisons.
Jane, I actually have to tell you, I was a little worried about talking about providing a report, which I really have not, I've only attended 2 meetings. And so a lot of this has just been kind of observations, but I'm so glad that Frank provided me some updates and notes. And like I said, he is happy to provide, if anyone has questions, he's happy to provide some, provide answers and reports to us.
And so for those of you who are longer term attendees of these meetings, we've been trying to incorporate more of these liaison reports into the public session so that the Alliance members know what our board members are doing and what these commissions and boards are talking about that's important to them. So thank you, Mike. Our next topic, and I'm glad that Caitlin has joined us again. So Caitlin reached out to me and to the board to say that next year they're already starting to plan the Goldmark luncheon for February. And traditionally, the ATJ board has done an event after the Goldmark lunch, a kind of, and it's taken different forms, but it's been a meeting after the luncheon, about 90 minutes, involving the community. And there have been different foci over the years. Anyway, the board today voted that we would like to have the meeting after the luncheon. And so I can send you a formal email to that effect. But I want to throw it out to everyone here to talk about what, if any, ideas they have about what we could focus on for that after Goldmark luncheon. And I will say, though, it looks like Vanna had to sign off. One of those possible ideas is outreach that she had put in the chat for the previous question. So we are taking suggestions for what we could do after the Goldmark luncheon. Obviously, all of this is in the planning stages. I'm assuming, Caitlin, it's too early to know who the Goldmark speaker is going to be, or?
Yes, it's too early. And Laura, who I know is going to make a report coming up, will have a few more details about the luncheon itself. This has been, something that LFW and the ATJ board have co-sponsored. So, and it's kind of a unique opportunity, right? Because the people who are likely to attend this session, post-luncheon session, is a slightly different crowd than who will be coming to the ATJ conference. But typically most everyone here on this call knows it comes to the Goldmark luncheon. It's a opportunity to bring people in, and aside from presenting the Mark Award, one very successful thing that we've done in the past is invited the Supreme Court to participate in a roundtable. It doesn't have to be that, although that tends to draw in some of the, less usual suspects. People are really interested in that. it seems to me, a race equity focus would be not only appropriate, but totally in keeping with our state plan for the delivery of legal services. And one thing, I just would sort of offer up unsolicited, because I know that you guys are often running, is, what if we ask for an update to their letter to the community from the summer of 2020. Could we talk about it as a group? I don't know. So that was just one little notion that we had internally as a staff when we were thinking about this time for learning and listening.
Well, those are great ideas. And this is the beginning of a conversation that LFW and the ATJ board will have to plan for a post Goldmark luncheon event. As Cesar noted, tends to be Alliance attendees. Mike.
Yeah, I love this idea, Caitlin, and thank you so much for bringing this to the board. Question, is it typically post lunch or could it be something before the lunch? And I'm just wondering in terms of flexibility around scheduling. I just know that sometimes I know that sometimes it's hard to keep people's attention. I guess it may be depending on the topic after lunch. Yeah. But then I also was wondering if there was that, in terms of scheduling flexibility of like, what if it was like before the lunch and then into the lunch in the Goldmark? But
it's up to you it's kind of up to you. Honestly, at this point, the challenge is making sure that there's a sizable room at the Westin that could handle a crowd of between 50 and 100 people. Once they're at it's sort of a captive audience.
Yeah.
So,
I see. So once they're there, then they could maybe stay. I got it. Yeah.
We just to combat, the Friday afternoon fatigue, we just have lots of coffee and cookies.
Yeah, that was the schedule. And then the other thing is, it would be great to see, depending on who the speaker will be, is to tie that into a possible, topic or a debrief or a discussion to kind of go deeper. So it would kind of maybe dependent on who the speaker or the topic would be. But I love the idea because I think it's great that there's these sort of natural connections of how we can help deeper the conversation, deeper the, continue the conversation sometimes that some folks like to have when they have these really dynamic keynote speakers come.
Our our board committee has not met yet, and they're typically the folks who do a lot of outreach to potential speakers, and a couple of ideas I've had, and it's more of a wish list than, and I don't know if it's possible, but Michael Desmond, who wrote Eviction, has come out with a new book called Poverty by America, which I just finished, and wow, that he would be a great speaker. It's an amazing book. And another idea is there's a new book out called Project 562. A woman who's a member of the Swinomish tribe went around to each of the 562 federally recognized tribes in the country and did a full, it's like an art book with interviews. An amazing journey, through Indian country. And she lives locally, and I thought that she potentially could be a great speaker. So yeah, we're a ways away from finalizing the speaker, long story short.
So we will continue to work on this, and we will work with LFW, and so stay tuned for more information about the post Goldmark or pre Goldmark event. And Eva, I noticed your comment in the chat that sometimes some of the other groups tend to use the morning time for meetings, like the Pro Bono Council. So we will work on the logistics. All right. So now is the time we turn over to our funding reports. So Cesar, do you want to talk about federal funding? And you are muted.
Yes, thank you. You missed that part. Needless to say, I think we all understand that there's a little bit of a chaotic aspect to the what happened with the debt ceiling and all of that recently. But the congressional budget and appropriations committees have sort of focusing on getting the budgets completed, and there's an incentive in the Fiscal Responsibility Act that for the first time in memory calls on them to have a budget on time by September 30th, or there are some sanctions. In any event, obviously the majority in the House is not only really focused on trying to, per the legislation, turn the clock back to fiscal 2022 spending for all discretionary spending on the one hand, but what we've also seen is that they want even deeper cuts. So I have two pieces of information on that point, which is that the majority in the House has pushed through a party line vote on the House Appropriations Committee that would increase defense or so-called defense spending, but then push to reduce funding by 23% from current levels. And as far as the Commerce Justice portion of the budget, where LSC resides, the reduction would be 29%. So that's not good news. Of course, we're a long way from anything resembling a final number either in the House or Congress generally. The Senate, on the other hand, did approve a package that does include some reductions, which Chair of the Appropriations Committee, Senator Patty Murray, has indicated will be filled in using some of the IRS and other COVID recoupment mechanisms that were discussed at the time of the debt ceiling. The committee the subcommittee that works on the Senate in the Senate on the LSC portion has actually pushed through a preliminary vote to have the 2023, that is the current funding levels, continued into next year, which is very good news because again, even if you went back to fiscal year 22, you would have actual reductions from current funding, and anything lower than that would, again, not good. So again, we have Senate and the House at odds, at least at this preliminary stage, and there is a long way to go still. So who knows where, how that will play out. My guess is that the more extreme House positions will have to moderate. So hopefully that will stand, and the Senate prevails in the long run on this. Thank you.
Let's hope. Thank you, Cesar. Jim is on vacation this week. Rochelle, I hate to put you on the spot, but is there anything you wanted to update us about from the OCLA point of view?
Thanks, Terry. We just started the new state fiscal year, July 1st, and we were very busy getting all of the end of the year contracts wrapped up and executing new contracts and preparing invoices, making sure all of our billing was completed. And in addition, the legislature funded us some additional dollars so that we can add to our staff. And we currently have 4 vacancies that have been posted on OCLA's website. We're recruiting for 2 admin positions. We're also recruiting for 2 program staff with the Children's Representation Program. And so if you know of folks who are interested, I'll be sure to post the information in the chat. But Jim's been really good about sharing all of our vacancies on the ATJ listserv as well.
Thank you very much. Caitlin, anything you want to add about LFW?
No, just following up on our earlier conversation. The nominations for the Goldmark Award winner are open. Well, folks are invited to nominate someone. I think that will be through Labor Day that the nomination forms are available. So I encourage anyone in this meeting who knows of Access to Justice superhero to put forward great candidates to be considered. Other than that, as I mentioned at your last meeting, we're putting together a letter for our grantees about sort of what to expect in the upcoming grant cycle from Legal Foundation. We'll be talking about our revenue situation and what we think that means for our grantees and their clients. And we're also going to be talking about our funding priorities and really emphasizing that grant applications are, as we have always done and will probably forever continue to do, really focusing on those applications using a race equity lens. And what are we doing as alliance partners to dismantle the institutional racism in Washington. I was gonna throw in a comment that wouldn't be helpful here about the United States Supreme Court, but never mind.
We can just guess.
I know you're recording the meeting, and that's why I was like, well, okay. Anyway, just an overview for me. When we do send out that letter, I will copy it to the Alliance listserv. Thanks, Abby. So that everyone can just see what the picture is from our perspective and what we'll be looking for when we make those 2-year partnership grants this fall. But thank you, Terry. Thank you for everyone for listening.
Thank you, Caitlin. And Laura, last but not least.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, Goldmark, if you want to mark your calendar now, I would love it if you did. We're going to be going back to the Westin in downtown Seattle on Friday, February 16th. Our Goldmark committee is actually going to have its kickoff meeting this coming Monday before they start a monthly regular meeting schedule. And we're going to be prioritizing identifying speakers and getting out the word for nominations. If I don't get a chance to link it here in the chat, I'll make sure to. Oh, no, Alex is so good. She just did. The nomination form is linked right there. And as Caitlin said, we would really love to hear from you on who you recommend to honor and celebrate this year. For LAFCO, I have some, I think, exciting updates. We have a couple of really fantastic programs coming up for our 2 bi-monthly meetings, our next 2 bi-monthly meetings. This coming Thursday from noon to 1 over Zoom, we're going to be having a very quick agenda before we then focus on a facilitated conversation with Christiana Obey-Sumner, who is the principal at Epiphanies of Equity. She's going to be leading some discussion and maybe even breakout sessions with small groups around unpacking and dismantling white supremacy and white supremacy culture in the ways that it's sort of baked into the cake for fundraising and communications, and how do we begin to identify and do the ongoing work of parsing that out of our practices. So we've got some really nice feedback for that opportunity, that program that's coming up next Thursday. And then in September, I want to say it's, Thursday, September 21st, that will actually be a 2-hour session. It'll also start at noon. It'll go until 2. And that is going to be a consultant-led training. There's a woman named Kate Marple, who runs a firm that she calls Who Tells the Story. And she actually has extensive background working with legal aid fundraising organizations. And she's going to be helping us. This is going to be great for both the fundraising and comms folks in the room, helping us to better understand how we can take client stories, which are very personal, very sensitive stories, and obtain them with consent and tell those stories publicly in such a way that is empowering to the person whose story is being told. That's those 2 topics, unpacking race equity and greater sensitivity in telling client stories in a public way. Those 2 topics have been emerging in the LAFCO community. And so I'm really excited that we have some experts, some great thinkers coming in to lead those conversations. And then, of course, I have to plug Beer and Justice. Tacoma Wine and Justice is also this Thursday, the 20th, at Pat Palace's home. If you register, we'll get you that address. That's in Tacoma from 5 to 7 at his lovely home in North Tacoma. And then 2 weeks later, on August 3rd, at K&L Gates, we'll be celebrating Seattle Beer and Justice. Oh, and I should mention, at the Tacoma event, we're going to be hearing from both Judge Andre and Eduardo Peñalver. And then at Seattle Beer and Justice, we'll be hearing from King County Council member Gamay Zile. I apologize if I butchered his last name. I will work on that. But those events are coming up too. So please plan to join us if you can. And you're certainly welcome to join us at LAFCO if you'd like to hear from one of our guest speakers in July or September.
And I just want to say thank you to Terry for coming to Bellingham. Yeah. That was great. We'd love to have any and all of you meet up with us locally, or farther afoot if you have a mind. I'm looking at Judge Corbett. We're coming to Spokane on September 13th. Hope you'll join us. Anyway, they're really fun, informal event, happy hour type events. And it's always great to have friends.
Oh, and Jeremiah also in Spokane.
Oh, yeah.
So I will say it was great fun. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Laura. It was great fun to be there and to hear from, in the same way when being in Wenatchee, to hear from folks on the ground of what they're doing. So, all right, is there anything else for the good of the order? Judge Keenan.
Yeah, just I'll drop a link in the chat. The National Judicial College is having one of its 60th anniversary celebrations here in Seattle on Thursday, July 20th. And I put the link in the chat because there's 2 components to the program. One, from 4 to 5:30 is free. I'm moderating it, and it's a restorative justice panel. And we got some great speakers. Leal Echo Hawk, who's a tribal advocate and attorney. Sarom Poong, who's a peacemaking circle keeper. Representative Tara Simmons, Professor Talia Gonzalez from the Center for Racial and Economic Justice. And so going to be going to be a great panel. And I think there's that you get CLE credit for it. And again, it's free. There's a cost to attend the evening program, which is also great. It's got Chief Justice Gonzalez and Judge Lauren King and others, but I put that link in the chat.
Thank you for that. So for those who are not going to Pat Palace's house for beer and justice, can certainly go to the restorative justice. Other final comments for the good of the order? All right then. Well, thank you all for being here and being with us, and we'll look forward. I'm not sure at this point if we are going to have a public meeting in August. It may just be a working session, but if we don't, we will look forward to seeing you in September in person at the Tacoma Convention Center, September 28th to 30th. All right. Take good care, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.